He had a private island, a jet, friends in the highest places, and when he finally died in a cell, one question refused to go away. He didn't die alone. Who was really in the room? This is Murder at Midnight. For decades, Jeffrey Epstein moved through the worlds of finance and power with ease. He had a mansion in Palm Beach, a townhouse in Manhattan, a secluded estate in the US Virgin Islands. The island had a name, Little St. James. So did his jet. The press would later call it the Lolita Express. He flew the rich and the famous from city to city, from country to country. They came to his homes for dinners, for weekends, for massages, though that part was not in the brochures. To the outside world, he was a wealthy benefactor, a man who donated to science, who gave money to schools, who mingled with celebrities and politicians. His name appeared on guest lists, in society pages, in photos with people everyone knew. He looked like just another rich guy, another person who had made it. But behind that image, something far darker was taking shape. The girls were not in the photos. The island was not in the travel section. The jet had a manifest, but most people never saw it. What was really going on stayed hidden, until it didn't. Young women and girls were being brought into his orbit, recruited, manipulated, abused. The operation depended on more than one man. It required people who arranged introductions, people who looked the other way, people who benefited. Epstein did not act alone. And when the law finally caught up with him, and then when he died behind bars, the same question would haunt every headline. Who was with him? The first major crack came in Florida. In 2005, a tip came in, then another. By 2006, the Palm Beach police and the FBI were deep in the case. The case drew the attention of the FBI and local authorities. They saw the scope, the pattern. This was not one incident. This was years, multiple victims, a system with a lot of people in it. The women who had recruited the girls, the staff who had run the schedule, maybe even the powerful people who had flown on the jet and been to the island. The evidence was strong enough to support federal charges. A trial could have exposed not only Epstein, but the people around him. Then something happened that would haunt the case for more than a decade. A deal was struck. Epstein would plead to state charges instead. He would register as a sex offender and serve time in the Palm Beach County Jail, much of it on work release, in an arrangement that would later be scrutinized in the press. The federal case would be shelved. The full weight of the law would never come down on him. Questions would swirl for years. The deal was sealed in 2008. Alexander Acosta, the US attorney in Miami, had signed off. But why? In the years that followed, Epstein returned to his old life. He continued to travel on his private jet. He hosted guests at his homes in New York and Palm Beach and on the island. He surrounded himself with associates who facilitated his schedule, who arranged meetings, who brought girls into the fold. Survivors who had hoped for justice watched in disbelief. Some spoke out in the press, others filed civil suits, insisting that the story was not over. They named others women who had allegedly recruited and groomed victims, powerful figures who had been present at Epstein's properties, whose names appeared in flight logs and on guest lists. The narrative was no longer just about one man. It was about a network. Who had enabled him? Who had participated? Who had stayed silent? The phrase "he didn't die alone" had not yet entered the headlines, but the idea was already there. In the lawsuits, in the interviews, in the court filings. He had not operated alone. There were other people. There were women who had recruited the girls. There were people who had been at the houses, on Little St. James, in the townhouse. So who was with him? The question was there. It would take years for it to become the question that defined the case. The question that would trend on social media. The question that would be on the front of every paper when he died. But the survivors were already asking it. They had been asking it since Florida, since the deal, since the first time they had told their stories and realized that the others had names. and that most of those names had never been said out loud. Stay with us as we trace the web of power, the deal that let him walk, and the night in a prison cell that would make the whole world ask who was really in the room. The story continues. Before the arrests, before the headlines, there was just a system. It ran for years. Little St. James, the Jet, the house on El Brillo Way in Palm Beach, white, set back from the street. The townhouse at 9 East 71st Street. From the outside, it looked like any other rich person's home. But inside, there was a routine. Girls would be driven there, or they would get a call. Come to this address. You will give a massage. You will get paid. The person who called was often a woman. She would be at the house when they arrived. She would tell them where to go, what to do. She was part of it, not always in the same room, but she had set it up. She had brought them there. The same thing happened in New York, in the townhouse, and on the island. Girls were flown in, driven in, brought in by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Without them, the whole thing would have fallen apart. Epstein had the money. He had the houses. He had the jet. But he needed people to find the girls, to bring them to him, to make sure they showed up. That is what the survivors would say when they finally spoke. He was never alone. Yeah, there was always someone else. And for a long time, almost none of them had to answer for it. Palm Beach, Florida, mid-2000s. The investigation into Jeffrey Epstein is building. Detectives work long hours, chasing leads and interviewing survivors. The atmosphere in the precinct is charged with a mix of determination and frustration. They know they have something significant, a pattern of abuse that spans years and involves multiple victims. Each new interview adds another piece to the puzzle. Names are written on whiteboards. Phone records are mapped. The picture that emerges is not of a lone predator, but of an operation. There are people who schedule the appointments, people who drive the girls to the mansion, people who smooth over the logistics so that Epstein's world runs without a hitch. In interview rooms, survivors tell their stories. One young woman explains how she got pulled in. She says she was told it was a massage job. Good money. Cash. She needed the money. She went to the house in Palm Beach. Big house. Fancy. She says there was another woman there. Someone older. Well dressed. The woman was nice at first. She said to come in. She said to go upstairs. She told her what to do and how to act. She said the man liked massages. She said, just do what he asks. The survivor says she was not told the full story. She did not know what she was walking into. Then things went wrong. She says she felt she could not say no. She was young. She was alone. She did not know how to get out. When she left, the woman gave her money. She said to come back. She said to bring friends, other girls. The survivor says she did not want to. But she was scared and confused. She brought one friend. She says she has regretted it every day since. Then she could not live with it. She stopped going. But by then, she says, she knew there were others, lots of others. And she knew the man in the house was not working alone. The woman was always there, scheduling, greeting, making sure the girls showed up. She was in the room. She was part of it. The detectives write it all down. They hear the same pattern again and again. A mansion, a massage that was not just a massage, and always another person in the mix. Someone who set it up. Someone who was in the room in one way or another. Another survivor sits down with detectives. She is nervous. She says she does not want to get anyone in trouble, but she wants to tell the truth. She says she was 15. A girl at her school had said there was a way to make money. You go to this house. You give a man a massage. You get paid. She went. She says the house was huge, fancy. There was a woman there. The woman was nice. She said to go upstairs. She said the man was waiting. The survivor says she did not know what was going to happen. She says when it was over, the woman gave her cash. She said to come back, to bring friends. The survivor says she went back a few times. She says she did not know how to stop. She says the woman was always there, always in charge. She was the one who called. She was the one who set it up. The detectives ask for her name. The woman's name. The survivor gives it. That woman was part of it, she says. She should be in trouble too. The detectives keep building the case. They pull phone records. They map the schedule. They see the same names again and again. Women who called the girls, who drove them, who were at the house. The mansion in Palm Beach becomes a focus. The detectives learn who had keys, who had access, who had been there when underage girls were present. They pull visitor logs. They pull phone records. They see the same names. Women who had come and gone, who had brought girls, who had been in the house when the abuse happened. The picture gets clearer. This is not one man. This is a system. And the system has a lot of people in it. Some of them are staff, some of them are associates, some of them are famous, some of them are not. But they are all part of the same machine. They all made it possible. They were all part of the same machine. The detectives write reports. They send them up the chain. They list the names. They list the evidence. They wait for the word on whether there will be a federal case, whether there will be a trial, whether anyone will ever have to answer for what happened in that house. They think they have a strong case. They think they can get Epstein. They think they can get some of the others too. Then the deal happens, and the case goes away. The detectives are left to wonder who made that decision and why. The detectives feel the weight of what they're uncovering. They also feel the pressure from above. Rumours circulate about powerful interests, about lawyers with deep connections, about a deal that might be in the works. The question of who will decide the fate of the case hangs over every meeting. When the deal is finally announced, it sends a shock through the survivors and their advocates. They had been told the case was strong. They had been told the feds were involved. They had been told that Epstein could go away for a long time, that the people who had helped him could be charged too, that the full story could come out. Then the deal was announced, and none of that would happen. Epstein would plead to state charges. He would do a short stretch. He would get work release. The federal case would go away. The people who had helped him would not be charged. The people who had made the deal would not be named, not then. The survivors were not even told the full scope of the deal. Some of them found out from the news. Some of them found out from their lawyers. They felt betrayed. They felt forgotten. They felt like the system had decided that they did not matter, and that the man who had hurt them and the people who had helped him could walk. And the question would stay with them for years. Who decided to let him go? Epstein will plead guilty to state charges. He will serve time, but in a county jail with work release that allows him to leave for long stretches. The federal case, which could have put him away for decades and exposed his associates, will be dropped. In exchange, victims are not fully informed of the scope of the agreement. The outrage is immediate. Who negotiated this? Who approved it? In living rooms and in lawyers' offices, survivors ask, who was in the room when they decided to let him walk? One survivor says, she was not even told there had been a deal. She found out when she saw Epstein on the news. He was out. He was on work release. She had given a statement. She had named the woman who recruited her. She thought someone would go to prison. Real prison. She says she will never forget the feeling, like the people in the room had won. And she did not even know who they were. Who was in the room when they decided to let Epstein go? She still wants to know. Years later, documents and reporting will shed light on the prosecutors and the process. But in that moment, the message is clear. The system had failed them. Epstein would do his time, such as it was, and then he would return to his life. The people who had made the deal would remain, for the moment, in the shadows. He serves about 13 months, much of it on work release. He leaves the jail during the day. He goes to an office. He does his time in a way that feels to many like a joke. When he is finally released, he does not hide. He goes back to his life. He flies on his jet again. He is seen at dinners, at events. He is photographed with famous people. He goes to the island. He hosts guests. The message to survivors is clear. The system had let him go. The people who had made that decision were still out there, still unnamed, still free. Survivors file civil suits. They name Epstein. They name the women who had recruited them. Those women were part of it, they say. They should have to answer too. The suits drag on for years, but they keep the story alive. It puts names on the record. It forces the question, who else was in the room? Some survivors pursue civil litigation. They sue Epstein. They sue his estate. They name the women who recruited them. They name the people who were at the house. The cases drag on. Some get settled, some get stuck in court. But the lawsuits keep the story alive. They force documents into the open. They put names on the record. Some speak out in interviews. They go on TV. They talk to reporters. They name the women who had set things up. They describe the houses, the island, the jet. They say they want justice. They want the others held to account. The public's attention is sporadic. The story flares up. Then it fades. Then in November 2018, a major investigation by the Miami Herald reignites the story. Reporter Julie K. Brown digs into the deal that had let Epstein walk. Survivors talk to the Herald. One says she was never told the full story. She thought the case was going to trial. Then she heard Epstein had pleaded guilty to state charges, to work release. The woman who had recruited her was never charged. Nobody else was ever charged. Just Epstein. She says the Herald article was the first time she felt like someone was finally telling the truth about the deal, about the fact that it was not just Epstein, it was a whole system, and the system had let him walk. The Herald traces the timeline of the prosecution and the plea. They name names, including Alexander Acosta, the US attorney, who had signed the non-prosecution agreement in 2008. They quote documents. The article goes viral. Within days, politicians are calling for investigations. Advocates are demanding answers. Why had the federal case been dropped? Who had signed off? The pressure on law enforcement builds. In New York, federal prosecutors take a fresh look. They pull the old Florida files. They reach out to survivors. Some of the women had never spoken to the feds before. They had given up after the deal. But now they get a call. The prosecutors say they are building a new case. This time, they say, there will be no deal. Epstein will face federal charges. And if they can prove others were involved, those people will face charges too. The survivors are cautious. They have been let down before, but they agree to talk. They tell their stories again. They name the women who had recruited them. They describe the houses, the island, the jet. The prosecutors listen. They take notes. The stage is set for a reckoning that would capture the world's attention and end in a way no one could have predicted. Survivors watch the news. They read the Herald. The story is back. More reach out to tell theirs. The Herald keeps reporting. More articles, more names, more pressure. Politicians start to pay attention. They call for the deal to be investigated. They call for the victims to be heard. In New York, the federal prosecutors are already looking. The Herald story gives them cover. It gives them momentum. The public is watching now. The world is watching. Epstein's days of flying under the radar are over. The story is back. And this time, it is not going away. The story continues. July 6th, 2019, Teterboro, New Jersey. Early morning. The sky is still dark. A private jet sits on the tarmac. Engines cool. The kind of jet that the rich use to move between cities and islands without going through normal airports. Jeffrey Epstein is aboard. He has bags. He is preparing for a flight. Maybe to Paris. Maybe to the island. He has done this countless times. Departed from this airport. Slipped across borders. Moved between his homes and his island without anyone stopping him. Not this time. Federal agents have been watching for a while. They have built their case. They have the warrant. They know he is at the airport. They know he is about to leave. Maybe for good. Maybe he would have flown to a country that does not send people back. Maybe he would have disappeared. The agents move in. They surround the jet. They board it. Epstein is taken off. He is put in cuffs. He does not resist. He is taken into custody on charges of sex trafficking of minors. The charges are federal. This is not Florida. This is not a deal. There will be no deal this time. The prosecutors have said it. The survivors have been told it. This time he will face a trial. This time the full story will come out. Or that is what everyone thinks. No one knows yet that in a little over a month he will be dead. That the trial will never happen. The news breaks within hours. Headlines explode. TV stations interrupt programming. Survivors who had waited more than a decade get texts, get calls. He is arrested. He is in custody. He cannot fly away. The world is watching. In Manhattan, Epstein is brought before a judge at the federal courthouse. The courtroom is packed. Every seat is full. Reporters line the walls. Cameras are everywhere. Survivors and advocates fill the gallery. Their faces show hope, disbelief. Some of them have been waiting more than 10 years for this moment. The charges are read. Sex trafficking of minors, conspiracy. The words hang in the air. The prosecution argues that Epstein is a flight risk. He has the money, he has the jet, he has the connections. He has already evaded consequences once, in Florida. With the deal, he had walked. He had done a short stretch. He had gotten work release. He had gone back to his life. If he gets out now, they say, he will run. He will fly to a country that won't send him back. He will disappear. And the survivors will never get their day in court. They will never get to tell their stories. They will never get to name the others. The prosecution says the court cannot let that happen. If he gets out, they say, he will run. His lawyers push back. They say he will show up. They say he is not a danger. The judge listens. Then the decision comes. Epstein is denied bail. He will be held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York until trial. No release, no chance to run. A murmur runs through the room. Someone in the gallery lets out a breath. For many, it is the first time they have felt that the system might actually hold him accountable. That this time might be different. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarm. Survivors speak to the press. One says the fight is not over. Epstein is one man. There were other people who set things up, who brought girls to him. They need to be named. They need to be held to account. The phrase begins to trend. Who was with him? In the weeks that follow, more survivors come forward. They tell their stories to investigators and to the press. Their accounts paint a picture of a system. Recruiters who brought girls to Epstein's homes, staff who managed his calendar, guests who may have known or participated. Reporters dig into flight logs. The logs show who flew on the jet, when, where. Names appear in headlines. Some of the names are famous, some are not. And the question of who else was involved becomes central to the public conversation. People want to know who was on the plane, who was at the island. Behind the scenes, prosecutors work to build their case. They subpoena records, they interview witnesses, they talk to survivors who had never spoken before. They prepare for a trial that could expose not only Epstein, but others who had allegedly aided him. The atmosphere is tense. Survivors and their advocates hope that this time, accountability will extend beyond one man. They want answers, they want names. One prosecutor tells the survivor they are looking at everyone who was part of it. The survivor says she has waited a long time to hear that. Epstein, meanwhile, sits in his cell. The MCC, 150 Park Row, Manhattan, is crowded, loud. It is nothing like the mansion in Palm Beach or the townhouse in New York or the island. He is not in a country club this time. He is in a cell. He meets with his lawyers. They come to see him. They talk about the case. They talk about the charges. They talk about the trial that is coming. He does not get bail. The judge has made that clear. He is a flight risk. He has the money. He has the jet. He has already gotten away once. He will stay in the MCC until the trial. The survivors hear the news. They feel a kind of relief. He is locked up. He cannot fly away. He cannot disappear. They start to think about the trial, about testifying, about finally telling their stories in front of a jury, about finally naming the others. They do not know yet that he will be dead in weeks, that the trial will never happen. He does not get bail. He will stay there until trial. The world waits, survivors wait. They think about what the trial will be like. He will have to sit there. He will have to hear the charges. He will have to face the women he had hurt. Maybe he will finally have to name the others who had helped him, who had gotten away. The trial is set for the following year, but the trial will never come. The world waits for the trial that will never come. The story continues. August 10th, 2019, Metropolitan Correctional Center, 150 Park Row, Manhattan. In the early hours of the morning, a guard finds Jeffrey Epstein unresponsive in his cell. Unit 9 South. Paramedics are called. They try to revive him. It is too late. He is pronounced dead at 6:33 a.m. The official ruling will later be suicide by hanging. But the questions start before the body is cold. Why had he been taken off suicide watch days before? Why had his cellmate been moved? Who was in the room? Who was supposed to be watching him? The prison had a duty to keep him alive. He was facing trial. He had information. He could have named names. And now he was dead. The news explodes across every screen. Headlines stack up. Pundits and prosecutors and survivors all react within the hour. Within hours, conspiracy theories multiply. Had he been killed? Had someone needed him silent? Had the people who had been with him in life, in crime, in power, ensured that he would never testify? TV pundits debate it. Twitter explodes. In coffee shops and on social media, the same refrain. He didn't die alone. So who was in the room? One survivor goes on TV that same night. She says she's not surprised. She had always thought something would happen to him, that he would never make it to trial, that too many people had too much to lose. She says she just knows that he is gone, and now we will never hear him name the others. The question of who was with him would only get louder. Prison staff are scrutinised. Why had he been taken off suicide watch? Why had his cellmate been moved? Had the guards checked on him? Had someone looked away? Procedures are questioned. Investigations are opened. The director of the Bureau of Prisons is summoned to Congress. He has to answer for what went wrong. But for many, the most haunting question remains. Who was supposed to be watching? And who, in the broader sense, had been with him all along, on the jet at Little St. James in the house? The theories multiply. The truth may never be fully known. But the question sticks. He didn't die alone. In the wake of his death, the legal focus shifts. Epstein can no longer stand trial. The criminal case against him ends. Survivors who had braced for a trial are left with a void. Some feel cheated, others feel his death was too convenient. The question of who was in the room that night would never get a full answer, but the question of who had been with him for years would only get louder. The push for accountability does not stop. Civil suits continue. Survivors pursue claims against his estate. They want money, but they also want something else. They want the estate to release documents, to name names, to tell the world who was on the jet, who was at the island. The estate fights back. They say some documents are private. They say releasing names would hurt people who had nothing to do with the abuse. The survivors say that is not true. The people on the jet at the island had something to do with it. They were there. They were part of the world Epstein built. The world where girls were brought in and abused. The survivors say the public has a right to know. The courts become a battleground, motion after motion, ruling after ruling. Sometimes the survivors win. A judge orders documents released, names come out. Sometimes the estate wins, things stay sealed, but the fight does not end. And law enforcement turns its attention to those who had allegedly helped him. The woman most often named in that role, Ghislaine Maxwell, becomes the next target. She had been present at his properties for years. She had helped manage his schedule. She had been accused by survivors of recruiting and grooming victims. If Epstein had not acted alone, she was, in the eyes of prosecutors and many survivors, at the centre of that network. The question, he didn't die alone, was about to get a second act. The story continues. July 2nd, 2020, Bradford, New Hampshire. Federal agents close in on a secluded property. Ghislaine Maxwell has been in hiding. She has not been seen in public since his death. Now the agents have a warrant. They arrest her. She is charged with conspiracy and other crimes related to the sexual abuse of minors. The charges are serious. She had been at Epstein's side for years. She had been at the houses, on the island. She had been accused of recruiting girls, of grooming them, of bringing them to Epstein. The arrest is seen as a critical step, an attempt to hold accountable someone who had allegedly been at his side for years. Survivors react with relief. One woman says she had been waiting for this. She says the associate had been the one who brought her in. She had set it up, and now she was finally going to have to answer for it. Her extradition to New York takes time. Her lawyers fight it. But in the end, she is brought to New York to face the charges. The long legal battle that follows keeps the case in the headlines. There are delays, court dates get pushed. Then the trial date is set. Survivors prepare. Some will take the stand. They have waited years for this. They have told their stories to the police, to reporters. Now they will tell them to a jury. They will name the defendant. They will describe what she did, how she had brought them in. The prosecution works with them. They go over the questions. They prepare for the defence. The defence will try to tear them apart. That is how trials work. But the survivors say they are ready. They say they have nothing to hide. They say the truth is on their side. Finally, the trial begins. The courtroom is full. The defendant sits at the table. She does not look at the gallery. The survivors sit in the rows. They have come from across the country. Some have waited decades for this. They wait for their turn to take the stand, to tell the jury what happened, to name the defendant, to say she was part of it. The prosecution makes its opening statement. They lay out the case. They say the defendant was not a bystander. She was a key part of the operation. She had recruited girls. She had brought them to Epstein. She had been there. The defence pushes back. They say the defendant was used. They say she was under Epstein's control too. They say she was a victim. The survivors in the gallery shake their heads. They know what they saw. They know who had brought them there, who had told them what to do, who had been part of it. The defendant was not a victim. She had set it up. She had brought the girls. Now it is time for the jury to hear it. The prosecution calls the first witness. A survivor takes the stand. She is nervous, but she is ready. She has waited years for this. To sit in that chair, to look at the defendant, to tell the jury what happened. In court, survivors take the stand. One woman tells the jury she was 14 when she met the defendant. She says the defendant had been kind at first. She had taken her to the movies, given her gifts. Then she had asked her to give Epstein a massage. She had said it was no big deal, just go to his house. The survivor says she went. She says the defendant had told her what to do, how to act. She had driven her there. She had been in the house. She had been there. Not always in the same room, but she had set it up. The survivor says she did not know how to get out. She says the defendant had kept bringing her back, bringing other girls too. She says the defendant knew exactly what was going on. She was not a bystander. Another survivor describes a similar pattern. She says she was recruited through a friend. The defendant had reached out. She had offered money. She had said it was for massages. The survivor says when she got to the island, the defendant had told her what Epstein wanted. She had said to just go along with it. The survivor says she felt trapped. She says the defendant had made the arrangements, had been there, had seen what happened. A third woman takes the stand. She's older now. She was young when it happened. She says the defendant had been like a big sister at first. She had taken her shopping. She had bought her clothes. She had made her feel special. Then she had asked her to do a favour, to give her friend a massage. The friend was Epstein. The survivor says she did not understand what she was getting into. She says the defendant had known. She had set it up. She had been in the house. The survivor says she has waited a long time to say that in a courtroom, to say it in front of a jury, to make sure the world knew that the defendant was not innocent. Yes, the trial becomes a reckoning, not only with one woman's role, but with the broader question of who enables such abuse and who gets away. The courtroom is packed, the world watches. For the first time, a jury is asked to decide, had she been part of it? In December 2021, the jury has been out for days. The trial had begun in November at the federal courthouse in Manhattan. The survivors wait. They sit in hotel rooms. They pace. They wonder what the jury is thinking. Did they believe us? Did they hear what we said? Did they understand that she was part of it? The lawyers tell them to be patient. Juries take time. But the waiting is hard. One survivor says she could not sleep. She says she had waited so long for that moment, to stand in front of a jury, to tell them what the defendant did. Now the jury was deciding. Yeah, and all she could do was wait. Finally the word comes. The jury has reached a verdict. The courtroom fills up again. The survivors take their seats. Their hands are shaking. The defendant is brought in. She looks straight ahead. The jury files in. Their faces give nothing away. The judge asks the foreperson if they have reached a verdict. Yes, the jury returns. They have deliberated for days. The courtroom is packed. Survivors sit in the gallery. Reporters line the walls. The foreperson stands. She holds the paper. She reads the verdict. Guilty, guilty, guilty. On multiple counts, the defendant is convicted. The courtroom holds its breath. Then the room erupts. For the survivors in the gallery, the moment is electric. Relief, tears, hugs, the first real taste of accountability. One woman says she could not stop crying. She says it was not just about the defendant. It was about being believed. It was about someone finally saying that the people who had been there had to pay. Another survivor says she had waited decades for that moment. She says she will never forget the sound of the word guilty. It was the sound of justice, finally. Outside the courthouse, the survivors gather. Cameras surround them. They hug. They cry. One woman says she came to court every day. She says she needed to be there, to see the defendant sit there, to hear the survivors tell their stories, to hear the jury say guilty. She says it was for all of them, for everyone who had been hurt, for everyone who had been hurt and had to live with it. She says the defendant was one person, but she stood for all of them, the people who had made it possible, who had gotten away. Now one of them was going to prison. It was not enough, but it was something. The defendant would be sentenced later. She would get years in prison. The survivors would be there for the sentencing too. They would stand and tell the judge what she had done, how she had brought them in, how she had been part of it. The judge would listen. Then he would hand down the sentence. The defendant would be taken away. One of them would finally pay. The survivors would leave the courthouse that day. They would hug. They would cry. They would talk to the press. They would say it was a good day, a day they had waited for years. But they would also say it was not the end. She was one person. There were others. There were people whose names were in the documents, whose names were in the flight logs, whose names had been said by survivors, but who had never been charged. The fight would go on. The lawsuits would go on. The fight to unseal documents would go on. The question would go on. But for that day at least, they had won something. They had seen one person held to account. They had heard the word guilty, and they would take that with them. But the survivors would say again, she was one person. There were others. There were people on the flight logs, people who had been at the island, people who had never been charged. The fight would go on. For many observers, the outcome is a measure of justice. Proof that he didn't die alone could mean something in a court of law. At least one person who had been accused of standing beside Epstein would face consequences. Yet the conversation does not end there. Questions persist about others who had been in Epstein's orbit, people whose names appear in flight logs, in victim accounts, in the documents that slowly come out, but who have never been charged. The curiosity gap remains. In the years that follow, the story continues to unfold in civil courts and in the court of public opinion. Survivors keep suing. They sue the estate. They sue the people who had been named. They sue to get documents released. The estate settles some cases. Money changes hands. The survivors get something. Not enough. Nothing could be enough, but something. But the settlements often come with conditions. Some things stay sealed. Some names stay hidden. The survivors have to agree not to say certain things, not to name certain people. Some of them take the deal. They need the money. They need to move on. Some of them refuse. They say they will not sign away their right to speak. They say they want the names out. They want the documents out. They want the world to know the names. The fights go on for years. Court date after court date, motion after motion. Sometimes the survivors win. A judge says the documents must be released. The names must come out. Sometimes the estate wins. Things stay sealed. But bit by bit, the story comes out. Name by name, document by document. The list gets longer. And the survivors keep fighting for the rest. Other cases drag on. Lawyers fight over every page. The estate says some documents are private. The survivors say the public has a right to know. Who was on the jet? Who was at the island? Sometimes a judge agrees with the survivors. A batch of documents is unsealed. Names that had been blacked out are now visible. The press runs the names. The public digests the news. Then the cycle starts again. More lawsuits, more fights, more documents, more names. Another person who was on the jet, who was at the island. The list grows, but it is never complete. There are always more names. Survivors speak out in interviews and in memoirs. They go on TV. They write books. They do podcasts. They say the same thing. He didn't act alone. We want everyone who was there to be known. Epstein may have died in a cell, but the system that allowed him to operate for so long did not die with him. The question who was with him echoes still. It is a question about a single night in a prison and about decades of people looking the other way. It is the thread that runs through the entire story. He didn't die alone, and he didn't act alone. The story continues. 2022 and beyond, the legal and cultural aftermath. Civil settlements provide some measure of compensation to survivors. Money goes to some of the women who were abused, to their families. But many say that money can never repair the harm. It cannot give them back their youth. It cannot name the others. Lawsuits continue to name others. Estates, associates, institutions, people and places that survivors say enabled or benefited from Epstein's crimes. The debate over accountability remains fierce. Who should be held responsible? Who knew what and when? Should the people on the flight logs be named? Should the people who were at the island be forced to answer? The phrase "he didn't die alone" has become shorthand for a larger demand. That every person who was in the room, who recruited, he who facilitated, who stayed silent, be brought into the light. Survivors and advocates keep pushing for transparency. They go to court to unseal documents. They call for the release of more records, for further investigation, for a full accounting of who was involved. Sometimes they win. A judge orders a batch of documents released. The lawyers for the estate fight it. They say the names are private. They say releasing them would hurt innocent people. The survivors say the public has a right to know. They say the people who were on the jet, who were at the island, are not innocent. They say the documents should see the light. The judge rules. Sometimes the judge sides with the survivors. Names that had been blacked out are revealed. The media runs the names. The public digests the news. Survivors read the list. They say they knew it. They have been saying it for years. Now the world could see. Then the cycle repeats. More lawsuits, more motions, more documents, more names, more questions. Who was on that flight? Who was at the island that weekend? The media continues to report on new revelations. Names in flight logs, details from depositions, the inner workings of Epstein's world. Who flew where? Who was at the island when? The public's fascination with the case shows no sign of fading, in part because the central mystery remains unresolved. We know Epstein is dead. We know one associate was convicted. But the full list of who was with him, in life and in crime, has never been fully settled. That uncertainty is the curiosity gap that keeps the story alive, and it is what keeps survivors fighting. They want the full list. They want everyone who was there to be known. Yao would be held to account, or at least to be named. So the world can see who was really there. Every time a new batch of documents is unsealed, the survivors watch. They read the names, they see who was on the jet, who was at the island. Some of the names they already knew. They had told the police, they had told reporters. Now the names were public. Now the world could see. Some of the names were new. People they had not heard of. People who had been in the background, who had stayed in the shadows, until now. The survivors say it is not enough. They want everyone held to account, not just named, but it is a start. It is proof. Proof that he didn't act alone. They have been fighting for years, some of them since they were teenagers. They have gone to the police, they have gone to the press, they have gone to court. Yet they have stood in front of cameras and told their stories. They have named the woman who recruited them. They have described the houses, the island, the jet. They have said the same thing over and over. He was not alone. We were not alone with him. There was always someone else, someone who set it up, someone who was there, and we want those people known. We want them to answer. We want the full story told. Not just the part about Epstein, the part about everyone who made it possible. The fight is not over. The documents keep coming out. The names keep getting revealed. And with each new name, the survivors say the same thing. We told you. We said he didn't act alone. We said there were other people. Now you can see. Now you know. In communities and in courtrooms, the legacy of the case is still being written. Some survivors have found a measure of healing in seeing at least one enabler held to account. Others live with the knowledge that many questions may never be answered. The prison cell where Epstein died has been scrutinised. The timeline has been picked apart. Who was on duty when they checked? Why he had been taken off suicide watch? The possibility of foul play has been debated. In Congress, in the press, in living rooms. Some people think he killed himself. Some think he was killed. Some think we will never know. But the deeper question has always been about the room that came before. The homes, the island, the jet. Who was in them when the girls were brought in? When the abuse happened? When the money changed hands? He didn't die alone. And as long as that question lingers, the story is not over. Over the next few years, more documents are unsealed. It happens in waves. A judge orders a batch of records released. The lawyers for the estate object. They say the release will hurt people. The judge rules. The documents come out. Names that had been blacked out are now visible. Reporters rush to publish. They run the names. They run the dates. They run the flight logs. Who flew where, when. The names include people who had flown on Epstein's jet. People who had been to Little St. James. People who had been part of the world he built. Some of the names are already known. They had been in the press before. They had been named by survivors. Some are new. People the public had not heard of. The public digests the list. Survivors read the names. For many it confirms what they had always known. Epstein was not alone. Now some of those names are finally in the light. Lawsuits continue. The estate settles with some survivors. The settlements include money. They also include agreements about what can be said, what can be released. Some survivors take the money. Some say it is not about the money. They want the documents, they want the names, they want the full story to come out. Lawyers fight over every page, every name. Sometimes the survivors win. A new batch of documents is unsealed. More names, more details, more proof that he didn't act alone. The story keeps going. It does not end. Because the question does not end. And until every person has been named, has been held to account, or at least been forced into the light, the survivors say they will keep fighting. They will keep showing up to court. They will keep giving interviews. They will keep saying the same thing. He didn't die alone. He didn't act alone. We want to know who was with him. We want the world to know. The story continues. A final reckoning remains elusive. Documents continue to surface. Names are redacted, then a court order forces them into the open. More names, more questions. Some of those people have been held accountable. One is in prison, the woman who had been at Epstein's side for years, who had recruited girls, who had been at his side. She was convicted. She will spend years behind bars. Others have been named in lawsuits, in the press, in the documents that have been unsealed. Some are famous, some are not. Some have denied any wrongdoing. Some have stayed silent, but many have never been charged. They have never had to sit in a courtroom and answer for what they did or what they knew. The curiosity gap, who was really in the room, drives the ongoing interest in the case. It is a question about power. Who gets to walk away? Who has to answer? The survivors have fought for years. They have told their stories to the police, to the cameras, to the jury. They have named the woman who recruited them, the people at the house, on the island. They have sued. They have fought for documents. They want the full list. They want everyone who was with him in the light. The case has become more than one man. It has become a symbol of who has to answer and who gets to walk away. He didn't die alone. And until we know everyone who was in the room, in the cell that night, in the houses, in the offices where the deal was made, the story will not be complete. Today, survivors still meet, support groups, advocacy meetings. They talk about the trial, the verdict, the documents that have come out. They want more names, more accountability. One woman says she tells her story to anyone who will listen, for the girls who cannot speak, the ones who are still too scared, the ones who did not make it. Another says she will never stop asking who was in the room. That question is the whole point. It is why she went to the police, why she went to court, why she keeps showing up. The day every person who was there has been named and held to account, she says, is the day she can finally rest. Until then, they keep fighting. That's the story of Jeffrey Epstein. The trial never happened. The names are still being fought over in court, and the question remains unanswered. He didn't die alone. So who was really in the room? If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a comment with what you think really happened. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you at midnight.